Welcome to the Cybersecurity Summit. Today we're going to be talking about SOAR with some amazing panelists. I'm Kristin Judge, and I'm the founder of the Cybercrime Support Network. We are a nonprofit serving individuals and small businesses impacted by cybercrime. You can find out more about our work at our booth, and the booth for any of these great panelists, if you want to talk to them more after the panel, please reach out and take some time to go to the booths. So I'm going to have the first thing we're going to do is go through and have each of you introduce yourself and tell us who you are and where you work. So we'll start with Dan.
Hey, Dan Bearl. I'm a program manager at Recorded Future, a threat intelligence company. My role with the company is basically overseeing client deployments within their environments and making sure that everything is set up and running smoothly for them.
Thank you. Abdel?
Hey everyone, Abdel Fane. I'm with CSNP, Cybersecurity Nonprofit. We are a nonprofit organization that's dedicated to promoting the education of security across the world. And while CSNP is it's a volunteering position for me, I do work as a cybersecurity consultant for a global consulting firm, Protivity.
Great, thank you. Jason?
Hello, everyone. My name is Jason Dablow. I'm a principal engineer with Trend Micro. We're a manufacturer of security solutions for protecting a wide range of assets throughout an organization. My particular role, I get to travel around, or used to, all up and down the west coast of the United States, talking with customers on how they're moving through either a cloud migration or DevOps transformations, and really how they can really help orchestrate or automate the tooling that they have in place today. So great to be a part of this. I want to thank Aurora for letting me partner with them.
Wonderful, thank you. And Nathan?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Nathan Wenzler. I'm the Chief Security Strategist here at Tenable. We are the founders of the vulnerability assessment tool Nessus and the leaders in risk-based vulnerability management, and very, very happy to be here today.
Thank you so much, everybody. I'm going to have this first question start with Jason. What type of tasks can be automated by a SOAR solution so you can free up time for routine tasks that people are spending time on?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it's right in the name, right? Those routine tasks. So you want to really free those up from your security professionals that are doing the same thing over and over. I always like to say if you do something 3 times, it might make sense to automate it or throw it into a SOAR solution to automate it in that regard. So anything that you're kind of spending more and more time on that that can be easily automated, or you're doing the exact same, clicking the same 3 things to resolve it. And that could be through a variety of different solutions. So ultimately, I think it comes down to something that's repeatable and something that's really easy as kind of those first few routine steps or tasks in order to automate.
Thank you. Abdel, what do you think about that question?
Thank you for that question, Christine. And before I jump into there, I do want to make something clear. I think there is a misconception in the industry that somehow automation and this technology are going to replace people, right? And I don't think that's true whatsoever. We should see these tools as our colleagues. They're here to really augment to what we're capable of, right? One of the problems that you see in a lot of corporations is alert fatigue. They're getting billions of data coming in. And as a human being, it's humanly impossible to process that much data in a short period of time, right? Now, several ways that this technology can help the security teams is through, you build in advanced logic to minimize those alerts for those specific teams so that they're not spending so much time trying to figure out what's happening. And to what Jason said earlier, right? If you have repeatable process, some things are just going to be normal. You're going to keep seeing it over and over. Automate it. There's no point of a human looking at that, right? So you can have automated remediation, take certain action when certain events occur. Now, and with these automated tools, you can actually have them reach out to a specific team, right? When you see certain alerts, you can say, hey, go talk to this team because we don't want to spend this so much manual time reaching out to them, figuring out what happened, right? The tool can do that for you. When we think about, security and organization that has to do with data, it comes down to time. Time is very crucial. And just last year, 2019, IBM, in one of the IBM report, they saw that the average time to identify a breach was 206 days. That is a lot of days, a lot of time for an attacker to be able to get all of your data out and clean all of their traces, right? So these tools are really here to help us minimize time so we can focus on what really matters.
Thank you, appreciate that. This question is going to be for Dan now. Dan, we know that security teams already have a lot of tools in their toolbox and already running. And how can you connect existing technologies with your SOAR solution?
Yeah, I mean, so going beyond just the technical questions of APIs and how you technically move data around your environment, this could definitely be a pretty heavy lift for getting your SOAR solution implemented. Especially if you're not using a single vendor ecosystem. So if you've got tools from multiple vendors that need to work together. We usually recommend clients approach this fairly strategically and really start with well-defined, repeatable processes, as kind of has been touched on already. And we say that because by their nature, integrations just don't work in an ad hoc fashion, especially if you're building automated workflows. The best approach is you identify the workflows that exist in your environment or aspirational workflows, and then figure out which tools exactly, if a human were doing it, what would they be interacting with? And we like to kind of group these into different categories of where they fit in that workflow timeline, right? So, you might group of, there's certain tools that might initiate a workflow. This might be alerts out of a SIEM or something like that. So what's feeding into your SOAR tool and kicking off work? There's also tools that are contributing to an investigation. So, if an analyst is doing research, where are they getting data from to help them make a determination? And then, there's also consideration for tools that facilitate cross-team coordination. So the ability to route work to the appropriate teams within your organization is important too. And then finally, identifying which tools the work is going to end up in. So is the end result a firewall rule that gets deployed? Is it some action taken on a workstation? Is it a report that gets submitted? So, and there are tools around all of these steps, in the workflow. And once you've identified the exact tools that fit in there, that's when you start saying, okay, what can we do programmatically? What's possible out of the box? Like what's quick and plug and play, and then what will take kind of a heavier engineering lift to get the data into our SOAR tool or out of our SOAR tool as we need it.
Thank you. Jason, would you like to join in on this one?
Sure, and that was an awesome answer, very complete and detailed. So appreciate that, Dan. I think to add too, I think it really depends on the size of the company as well. So for me, I work with a lot of enterprises, so over 1,000 employees and up, all the way to the very large with hundreds of thousands of employees. They'll typically already have maybe a main collection point like a SIEM where you're already getting the data from a number of different security technologies. And that makes the easiest integration into SOAR tooling since you already have the assets that you can trigger on. So for example, you might be already collecting a whole bunch of information from, say, firewalls or endpoint security tools that are all feeding up into a SIEM already. So those make natural choices in terms of assets that you can actually integrate into. Granted, they have the capabilities or the APIs that are open to do so as well. So I would say as long as the tooling has that capability with the APIs and you want to make a definitive choice in terms of that time saving, as myself and Abdel mentioned at the beginning, that time saving might make sense as a good qualifier for the first kind of security tooling to do that integration with, as well as making sure that it actually has the ability to do that. But kind of in summary, you have that collection point to the SIM already, and tooling that exists in that already that have the capabilities of an API really makes that first logical sense in terms of automating and integrating those into a SOAR solution.
Thank you, Jason. Now, we've talked a lot about the technical part, and Abdel hinted a little bit at the idea around this is a human issue too. There's a lot of questions around workforce. And so I'm going to dive into a few questions here now. I'm going to start with Nathan. And Nathan, people get a little bit worried about AI, being incorporated into an organization. And so what shift towards automation and machine learning, how does that impact the workforce?
Well, I think there's kind of two sides. There's a perceived impact and there's an actual impact. I think that a lot of the rhetoric that gets generated around machine learning and AI and this kind of automation in general is that we're out to replace all of the humans, that we're going to just automate all of the tasks into perfections, and we'll just fire everybody and save all this money, and that's what the corporate overlords are really after here, right? Which frankly, it's just not going to happen. The reality is there's still way too much that requires human interaction and human intervention, and that none of the jobs are going anywhere. None of the workforce is really going to be impacted by this in that way. I think the reality of what we're going to see, though, and especially for security practitioners, I think this is the big message that needs to get out there by management and leadership in any organization, is that you've hired information security professionals to do something in your organization. And I would bet in most cases, and the ones certainly that I've seen, most of those folks have probably gotten bogged down in all this day-to-day stuff. You've hired somebody who's an incredible pen tester because you need them to be pen testing your applications. But today we really need to manage the Microsoft monthly patches. And so let's have them taking care of spreadsheets of patch data and getting that out to the teams because frankly, it just needs to get done. Well, that's not really what you hired them for. That's not what you wanted those folks to be doing, right? So the power for something like SOAR can be in really getting your workforce back to what you wanted them to do in the first place. And you're going to see then that organizations get much better value out of their teams because you're going to get that high level critical thinking required kind of work that only a human brain can do. And you're also going to find that your workforce is much more satisfied. I know myself, that's the kind of work I want to do. I don't want to get stuck in doing sort of the repetitive tasks that can be automated. So it's really kind of lack of the cliche here, a win-win sort of situation for most organizations if they can get the message across. Like, this is not a workforce replacement tool. This is getting everybody back to doing the things that they want to do and that the organization is going to get better value for. And that's really where this should be seen.
Yeah, so communication is going to be really important. Dan, would you join in on this one?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's, I totally agree with everything said there. Two things I think, areas where it could impact, our workforce and our teams. The first being in the skills required. There's probably some shift in, the desired skills on a security team, and then also, a potential concern. I don't think it's huge, but maybe an unintended consequence could be, if there's a loss or decrease in the need for entry-level work on security teams, it could create a bottleneck, kind of an inverted pyramid of talent within the industry that we just need to be aware of. On the skills point, I think as shops become more and more automated, the need for in-house dev or scripting capabilities increases, not just for getting everything set up and running in the first place, but it's never a one and done. Getting automation integration set up is always iterative, almost always iterative. I should qualify, and it requires tuning. And so having your own development assets on the security team makes you much more agile to adjust how your automation is functioning, to address maybe shifts in threat priorities or threat landscape. And also with regards to machine learning, if we start to see machine learning or artificial intelligence start to take over more and more of that alert triage, kind of risk determination within the environments, you shift some of the work then to your team to be basically handlers of these algorithms to make sure that they're continuing to perform the way you expect them to. And that's a very different skill set than someone reading security alerts and determining a risk there. And just, sorry, go ahead.
You brought up a really good point about not, if it takes away the job of all of the folks that are sort of at that lower incoming level, then where are we going to put them? That's a really good point. I hadn't heard that before. Go ahead and finish.
Yeah, but kind of on that point, I don't think it doesn't necessarily eliminate the need for those jobs, and just kind of building on what's already been said. Recorded Future, we talk about this concept of a cyber centaur, which is this idea of an analyst who has kind of the brain and reasoning intuitive powers of a human, but the speed of all of these automated tools that just makes them more efficient and more powerful than either system would be on its own.
Yeah, thank you. And so this really goes right into the next question really well. Abdel, how do you train your in-house team to be able to effectively use SOAR tools?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Kristin. We've all seen that talent has been a challenge, right? In 2021, just next year, we're going to see a 3 million unfulfilled cybersecurity jobs, right? And that's a problem. And Nathan actually tapped onto this, right? He said, you're hiring people and they're doing other things. That's true, because you don't have enough people. You don't have enough skilled people who are out there. Now, of course, some of the things you can do internally is you provide them the right training. You provide them the right training to the product, but not only the product, you also customize this training to your organization's need, right? And something to keep in mind is that training is a continuous thing. It's something that's ongoing. You don't get trained on one thing and just say, okay, I know this now, right? Technology is ever evolving. So you really have to get yourself out there. And I highly encourage organizations to encourage their security team to get more involved and in their communities, right? Things like meetups, webinars, workshop. These are the ways that your people are going to keep up with what's coming. And on top of that, it's kind of hard as an organization to tell your team to say, hey, go to meetups, right? It's hard because you can't really tell them what to do outside of the work time. So really, they have to believe in security, right? They have to believe that the work they're doing, that it's making a difference, right? And it's going to be up to the organization to find these individuals who actually believe in these things, or at least inspire them to believe in that, right? And of course, we all talk about the talent gap. We all talk about the challenges, but we got to start asking ourselves, what can we do to actually fill this gap, right? And organizations like CSNP, this is where they sort of come in, right? This is a nonprofit who provide free training, right? I think organizations will start looking at these other organizations and say, hey, how can we fund this more so that we can have more talent pool that we can grab onto, right? Because again, as this challenge continue, you're going to have more and more problems. You're not going to have enough people, and these people are going to get tired. You're going to, they're going to get that fatigue, right? And that's when problems start occurring, right? That's when you miss a certain alert, and that alert says, hey, there's a bad guy here, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that leads right into the next question. So when this one's for Jason, let's start with you. So if there is an alert, when do you think companies are going to start feeling less nervous about giving an alert to a SOAR tool versus a human? Because are they wanting that human intervention? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I think it really depends on the risk analysis that you've done against either that workload that's running or the type of either traffic or event of where it's coming from. It's very similar in terms of like implementing a new security tool, making sure that the first implementation is where a workload team BU application that can, say, take some type of maybe downtime to the application. So for example, a good candidate for implementing a SOAR tool would be something coming from an internal portal for your own organization that might handle something like, handling employees' paid time off. Or on the flip side of that, something that you probably wouldn't do first was, your external website that handles all your customer orders. So identifying an application that actually has lower risk in terms of the organization, in terms of the events coming out of that particular application, and using that as a low risk medium in terms of getting your feet wet, if you will, in terms of implementing a tool like SOAR to actually start the automation of your remediation within that environment. Because as you're learning the tool, of course, we're all going to make mistakes as we're learning. It's a constant thing. We want to make sure that those mistakes are very low risk to the business and aren't affecting the growth or earning potential of that business. So ultimately, selecting the right workloads when it comes to implementing this technology and making sure that we have the ability to really don't provide an impact to the business and really continue that learning process with these automation toolings as well.
Yeah, so start slow and then hopefully you'll be able to build that confidence among the group. Nathan, did you want to join on this one too?
Yeah, I think there's an aspect to the crawl, run, or crawl, walk, run scenario there that Jason's sort of talking about here that it's fine, but we need to, I think, step back even from that to some extent. To your question, where organizations get nervous about turning over these decisions that humans have been making for a while over to the machines, right? And there's this fear that it's just going to run amok and take over your network and everything's going to fall apart, right? Skynet takes over. But I think that the organizations who embrace SOAR and do it in a way that they feel very confident about are the ones who have done the very, very hard work and very boring work, frankly, of really understanding their own internal workflows and processes and procedures to a point where they have the confidence to know what they do today on a day-to-day basis, which means they can define then the expectations within the tool more appropriately. So if I know what I do every day, then I know what the machine should do every day. I should know what the output of that should be. I'll have a lot more confidence that the tool is going to deliver the kind of workflows and automation that I need. Same would be in response, same would be for remediation effort, the same kind of thing. But many organizations struggle with this, right? It's frankly just not sexy to document all of the work we do every day and make sure we understand all our processes. And so most companies don't. And if you don't have that well defined, yeah, you're going to be very nervous about this because you're not sure what you do today. How are you going to be sure that the machine's doing it right? So get those processes understood, document them if necessary. But when you really have that under wraps, that kind of nervousness and fear from the automation, it really starts to melt away because you know the before, you know the after, you can build all the pieces in between.
Thank you for that. And Nathan, if you could help us round out the discussion on the human part of this, how do you attract and retain talent so that you can keep this SOAR system working?
It's a big challenge as several folks have talked about here and hinted at today, and Abdel's talked already about the training aspect. But I think my advice for organizations, let's talk first about the attraction part. If I need to attract talent, 3 million person shortfall coming up here in the workforce, it's a big problem. I think what we see in a lot of cases is that hiring managers and companies in general, they're looking for unicorns, right? They want those security professionals that have 30 years of experience and they've done every tool in the book. And there's just frankly not many of those folks out there. And they don't really understand what it is they're after. And really what they need to be doing is not cutting and pasting job descriptions from Google and other companies that use them. They need to understand what they need in their own organization and frame this in what it's supposed to be. And when I say that, I mean, frame this in the idea that information security as we know it today is not truly a tech discipline. It's not an IT function. It's a risk management function, right? We're here to help manage risks in organizations. And if you think of it from that standpoint, suddenly your world will open up in terms of the types of talent pools you can pull in that have strong risk management backgrounds. I mean, some of the best CISOs and security practitioners I've seen and come across are folks that came out of legal backgrounds, they came out of financial backgrounds. They're people who understand risk. And they're able to then, with some training education, obviously, learn the technologies and learn the tools, but getting out of the box a little bit and not just looking for the engineers who happen to also be security experts, really understanding risk management professionals and looking for those kinds of folks that have the right thinking around risk. they're the ones that can bring a lot of value to your teams, because they're more in line with information security than I think people realize. And it's an incredible skill set you can bring to the table. Now,
Good point.
of course, once you find those people, you've got to hold on to them, to your point. And I think the other part of that here comes down to a matter of culture. We could talk compensation packages and competing companies for the big money that Silicon Valley loves to throw out there. Sorry, everybody, hi. But the reality is, I think the people in the workforce are starting to really make a shift towards personal fulfillment and personal values, and people are clamoring for organizations that will essentially help make their own personal lives better. Right? These are the organizations that have really strong culture that support their employees doing things like volunteer work, or as we just had, fairly recently here, voting. My company gives time off to make sure everyone votes. That was a huge thing for a lot of employees when they came on board. Those companies who understand people and really foster a positive culture that is about flexible schedules and helping them with their lives, and not just putting foosball tables in the break room and giving them free snacks at breakfast, lunch, and dinner, which my boss is listening. I'd love the free lunches, please. I'd have them delivered. But yes. Culture, that's where we need to start focusing these organizations. That's how you're ultimately going to retain it. It may seem hard, but I'm telling you, people today in information security, that's the kind of company they want to stay with, the ones that take care of their people in that way.
And I think it's a generational thing too. I think the millennials are really starting to ask for that work-life balance. Great, thank
Absolutely.
you. And Dan, next question to you. Can you recommend any best practices for incorporating threat intelligence into SOAR workflows?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I do on a day-to-day. Yeah, so threat intelligence has a home in pretty much every kind of step of security processes, within our technology stacks and everything like that. But kind of plays a different role in different parts of your security technology suite. For example, I think places where we've been most comfortable doing threat intelligence historically are like in the SIM, maybe on some endpoint vulnerability management, and all of those are what we would call correlative threat intelligence. So you have some internal data, you have some external data, that's known threats, and let's see what's in common between these two data sets. When you get to SOAR, it's a little bit different, because within the SOAR, like within those kind of automated plays in a SOAR platform, threat intelligence starts to behave more like what an analyst would do if they were doing research. So it's less the bulk correlation and more enriching artifacts and confirming or denying or doing that triage within that SOAR tool. As an example, let's say like a command and control, that you have a potential command and control communication from within your network. Your SIM might alert on suspicious outbound traffic, and that could come from behavioral or from threat intelligence correlation. Kicks that over into an automated platform. But once it gets to the SOAR tool is going to do a much deeper enrichment on the actual artifacts related to that incident. So it's going to look up addresses, it's going to look up domains, it's going to pull all this stuff together and create a much more complete picture, either to make a determination within the system, say there's no risk here, or to have something available to your analyst, so that a lot of the legwork's already been done before a human even looks at that particular incident.
Great, thank you so much. There's this new term out there, Abdel, I'll have you start with this, called Devsecops. Can you explain what that is and how it relates to SOAR?
Yeah, so Devsecops has been a trending word recently, and it really stands for development, security, and operations. And the idea behind it is, how do you bring these teams together? Because as we've seen today, organizations and customers want new features delivered yesterday, right? How do organizations keep up with that? Well, they need to start automating a lot of these the development processes. So while SOAR focuses on enterprise as a whole, DevSecOps actually focuses on securing your software development lifecycle. So you can think of SOAR as the big umbrella, and Devsecops is just a piece under that, right? And the idea behind Devsecops is shifting left. How do we start doing more security things when we're building software in-house? How do we start testing them for security issues as early as possible, right? Not when the software is shipped and is in production, but before even we start building the software. So, you might start thinking, okay, how does all of this contribute to SOAR? Well, when you think about it, SOAR is collecting a lot of data within your organization, right? There's a lot of moving pieces. There's endpoints, your users, you have web application. There's a lot of noise. The more data you have within your organization, the more it's going to be challenging for these automated tools to make correlations, right? Because they have to process all of that data. Now, the idea behind DevSecOps and SOAR here is, if you can start doing DevSecOps, those practices, and start testing your security for issues and vulnerabilities, guess what you're doing for your your SOC team? You're giving them less things to look at, right? And we talked about time. Time is really important. The less thing they have to look at, the more time they can focus on things that actually matter.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Jason, would you like to join on this one?
Yeah, please. Especially on one of the terms that Abdel mentioned, shifting left. It's almost like pushing left nowadays, that I like to say. And it comes down to that friction that happens between development teams and security teams. And ultimately, as we're going to be more successful in the future, is really bridging that partnership, right? So, Nathan spoke about, careers of security engineers and requiring, these companies looking for unicorns and programming experience and all sorts of new skills for incoming security engineers. I would totally agree with that that's the way we are moving in terms of security engineers having programming experience as well. But I think the start of a baby step between extending that palm leaf between development teams and security teams, having them work together, and having the development teams actually help with security by either shifting left or pushing left, solving those challenges earlier, and ultimately having them, the development staff, be empowered to actually add security into their workflows. And whether that's supplying the automation scripting into a SOAR tooling, or fixing problems earlier within their pipelines, either of those makes sense as that first step as we start moving into this new world of DevSecOps and automation tooling.
Great, thank you. Yeah, let's try and build the security into the development side, please. I think that would be great. Nathan, next question for you. So how can we better prioritize what threats are addressed automatically versus which ones need the hands-on attention?
I think for the prioritization effort, trying to filter out what can be automated, what can't be, really does come down to the aspect of visibility about the threats themselves. Dan touched on this already in terms of incorporating threat intelligence, which is a huge part of this. We can understand better what the threats are actually about, just beyond just a technical severity rating. Let's get into, is there malicious activity happening around these threats? Is there exploit kits now available? Is there something real world, happening around this threat? That's going to help prioritize a little bit, because it's a risk now to your organization, right? But you have to be able to pair that with an understanding of your environment as well. Understanding which assets are most critical in your environment, where you need to focus your time and resources, is another big piece of this. I think the organizations who have identified that, beyond just all my servers are critical, you can't say that, because we can also go the other direction, right? All my laptops are not critical, I can ignore them, until the CFO is the one who gets compromised. His laptop gets compromised with, whatever ransomware piece, and now you've got all the financials of your company stuck. Understanding your critical assets, where they live, how you manage them, pairing that together with some really strong threat intelligence around what's happening with these threats. That's one of the ways where, look, the things that are really important that I need to surface, humans probably need to get involved and do the hard work to solve them. The rest of the things, we can automate that off to whatever process we're automating it to, patch teams, reporting, whatever the case is.
Great point. Thank you. And Dan, this question's for you. What are some of the biggest challenges you've seen security teams face when actually trying to implement SOAR for the first time?
Yeah, there's two major challenges that we see come up time and again. The first, going back to the just developing workflows around your SOAR tool, your use cases, and then also selecting the most appropriate SOAR solution for your team and your environment. On that first point, again, if your shop is operating ad hoc, or if you don't have clearly defined what you want the tool to do for you, it's not going to do much for you. So you have to have all that defined, very clearly defined, to get the most value out of that. And then with regards to selecting the best solution, there's a lot of options out there on the market of varying capabilities and complexity. Some are extremely flexible and extremely granular, but require a pretty heavy lift to get them up and running properly. There's others that do a great job out of the box, and it's more kind of a plug and play. You don't need to know how to write any scripts or anything to get it to work properly. So, being honest about what your team capabilities are and what you're comfortable with, and kind of everything you've got going on in your environment is important questions to ask before you even purchase a specific solution.
Great point. And thinking about the whole team, Nathan, we'll do the last question with you, and then everybody will have a wrap up. Nathan, how much should your non-IT business units be involved in your SOAR implementation?
A lot. Is that the short answer? Is that how
That's a good answer. I like that one.
Yeah. I mean, again, think about this from a risk management standpoint. I mean, ultimately, what we're automating here are security practices and processes that do ultimately affect the whole organization. And especially when we're getting into the response part of SOAR, you may have to, if you're dealing with a big threat or a data breach that's taken place, you may have to get legal involved. You may have to get your PR team involved if it's gone public. You may have to get your HR folks involved if it's an insider threat kind of situation. So having all of these other teams involved early in the process so they understand and have a place to chime in with what's important for their part of the process, again, it goes back to understanding your process. It's really, really important to bring those folks in. Maybe not during the technical implementation, but the earlier you have that input about the process, the better you can make decisions about how to configure and set up those automation flows to support the business as a whole.
Yeah, especially in your incident response plan. Those people all better be at the table. You better have the relationships ahead of time anyway. Yeah, good.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you. First of all, before we wrap up, I want to make sure that everybody that's listening knows that all of these great experts have a booth. We want to make sure you continue the conversations with them. Your vendors are your support system, and have a lot of great resources for you. So now we'll just have everybody, what are your parting words for the audience? Should you go after SOAR if you're already there? Should you stick with it? Dan, send us off here with your last comments.
Yeah, I think I just say, don't be afraid of automation, because it's a great force multiplier. And I encourage teams to think about the ways that it can make their teams more effective, as opposed to just replacing workers with computers.
Yeah, thank you. Jason?
Yep, effective and automated. So ultimately making sure that your organization is smarter as a whole, continue that learning, make mistakes along the way, because that's really how we learn in the DevOps world. Fail fast, fail often. So the quicker that you can learn and figure stuff out, the quicker we'll all be better in terms of applying these security solutions.
Thank you. Nathan?
Yeah, I would say, again, don't be afraid of the boring stuff, the hard work to understand your environment, understand your processes, procedures. Doing that work up front is going to help make every other part of this implementation with SOAR successful, and it's just better support your risk management efforts going forward, even beyond SOAR, having that understanding of your world.
Yeah, good point. So that work isn't going to be just for one thing. You can use it in other places too. Yeah, yep. Worth the time. Abdel?
I think everyone summed it up pretty well.
They took it all for you. Oh, goodness.
I would say, in addition to what everyone has said, train your people, right? These technology are going to continue to evolve, and more technology is coming because, again, there's a gap there, right, in the talent pool. So the more people we can train, the more people we can have using these tools and helping better your organization and keeping it safe.
And I like having another nonprofit on the screen with me because, it is a public-private partnership. We're not going to solve cyber issues alone. And so, bring the nonprofits in to support you. And we work with some really great for-profits and the federal government, state and local, because we do all have to work on this together. We have one adversary, and together we can really make a difference. So thank you again to the Cybersecurity Summit for the opportunity to moderate this amazing panel. And thank you, gentlemen, all for your expertise.
Thank you, Kristin. And thank you,
Thank you.
everyone.
Have a great day.
Thank you so much.